because that should just be the one for not the non-panelist link.
Okay.
But hi folks, we're gonna get started in just a moment. Again, if you're joining us here for our event with Grace Perry and Greg Mania, you are in the right place. We're here talking about Grace's debut collection, The 2000s Made Me Gay, Essays on Pop Culture. Here it is. We also happen to have signed copies here at Green Apple Books in beautiful San Francisco, California. Again, we're gonna get started in just a minute. In the meantime, I'd like to say, hello, welcome. I'm Car. I'm the events coordinator for Green Apple Books. I'm going to tell you about a couple of events that we have coming up before we get started. Tomorrow, Friday, June 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time here on the West Coast, Leona Godin will be joining us to discuss her book, Their Plant Eyes, A Personal and Cultural History of Blindness. She'll be in conversation with Maggie Nelson, National Book Critics Circle Award winner and complete genius of a writer, Maggie Nelson. We have signed copies of Godin's book, which include the coolest book plate ever, which is written in Braille. Again, that is tomorrow, June 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then on Tuesday, June 8th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Cheney Kwok will be in conversation with Daniel Handler to discuss his debut, The Passenger, How a Travel Writer Learned to Love Cruises and Other Lies from a Sinking Ship. Kwok was stuck on a notoriously stuck cruise ship, and this is his book about it. I'm excited to share too that this event will be broadcast live from our store to you on the internet, which is a first for us during this pandemic year. So that is going to be Tuesday, June 8th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Our whole events calendar is online at greenapplebooks.com. We have some pretty good ones coming up, including this evening's. All of our events are free unless stated otherwise. That being said, if you can, please do buy books. I can think of at least 2 that you can buy just off the top of my head. And if you've been here before, you have heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only are you supporting us as a store and helping us put on events such as these, you're also supporting the authors that are joining us for these events who have put so much hard work into writing these books. And then perhaps most importantly, you also get a book out of it, which is pretty cool. So if you can, please do buy books and buy them from us or another beloved independent bookstore. I'd like to alert you to as well the Q&A function on the bottom and or top of your screen, depending on your interface. We're going to have a Q&A portion at the end of the hour. I encourage you to enter your question at any time during the hour so it doesn't leave your head, and we'll get to those at the end. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the 2 authors joining us this evening. First, we have Greg Mania, who's a writer, comedian, and award-winning screenwriter based in New York City. His words have been published in The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, the Oprah Magazine, Paper, among other international online and print platforms. In film and TV, he's recently co-wrote and co-produced his first feature-length film, Dead Man's Barstool, which is currently available to stream on Amazon Prime Video. He has many accolades, including grand prize of the 4th annual Stage 32 comedy writing contest. But do not let the fancy awards fool you. He's still on a family plan. His debut memoir, Born to Be Public, is out now from Clash Books and at Green Apple Books. It is available. Please do welcome Greg Mania. Hey.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I'm really glad to have you back, Greg. And Grace Perry is a freelance writer based in Los Angeles, where she writes about pop culture, LGBT issues, food and drink, health and wellness, and much, much more, including most recently her interest in Instagram chiropractors, which you can definitely ask her about in the Q&A if you are so inclined. Perry has work featured in The Onion, Reductress, The Takeout, Chicago Magazine, and elsewhere. Her debut essay collection, if you have not seen it yet, The 2000s Made Me Gay, Essays on Pop Culture, is the reason we are here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Grace Perry.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here virtually in San Francisco. I'm astral projecting to San Francisco.
Thank you.
Same. So I am so excited to join you tonight in celebrating this magical book. And we have a lot to unpack, including your Instagram chiropractor situation. But before we get to that, did you want to start us off with reading a little bit from your book?
I would love to, Greg. Okay, cool. So I'm going to read a bit from an essay that's about halfway through the book called Banter Boys. And it's kind of about the thing of not knowing, it's like the very gay experience of not knowing if you want to be with someone or be that person. And so this is my experience of kind of being really drawn to these, this male archetype, this like teen boy, young man archetype that I identify as a banter boy. That was really a big thing in the 2000s. So I'm going to read a bit from that. I think that's all you need to know. I admired something in the Banter Boy's quiet self-confidence. Despite him being a tad more waifish, a smidge androgynous compared with the rest of his cast, perhaps because of it. It's like he had the wisdom and foresight to really understand that high school in Newport Beach or working at Dunder Mifflin is temporary. But they all have varying degrees of wealth and access. Sure, they're all cisgender white guys and thus have inherent privilege. The Banter Boy doesn't necessarily shatter any binaries, but I think as a teenager, I lusted for how the Banter Boy let being called queer roll off his back. It took power away from whoever used the word. And on some level, I wished I could thirst over girls with such confidence. And that's the core characteristic of the Banter Boys, the girls they love. They all pine for girls with boyfriends who don't even know about their existence. Seth Cohen's main thing is that he's obsessed with Summer to the point of creepiness. I mean, he named his fucking boat after her before she even knew its name. Jim and Pam rose to sitcom Will They Won't They Hall of Fame within 2 seasons of the show, and without them, The Office would have had about 1/10 of the sentimental value. In the pilot of Gossip Girl, Dan Humphrey's little sister, Jenny, teases him for having been utterly infatuated with Serena Vanderwoodson, a 16-year-old who all of New York weirdly wants to sleep with, for years. Christian tells the teen that he loves her the very first night they meet at the Moulin Rouge. Their crushes aren't circumstantial. They're not just there to advance the plot. No, they're full-blown personality traits. Love to Banter Boys is an inherent force that must be adhered to and is ultimately unattainable unless shared with one particular person. Because drooling over their love interest is so part of who they are, the Banter Boys all marry their dream girls in the end. Or at least their dream girls declare their reciprocal love while dying of tuberculosis in a Banter Boy's arms. And that's what appealed to me about Banter Boys as a queer kid. Not just the effeminateness or the fact that they liked watching movies alone more than hanging out with hordes of bros. It was the way they were defined by who they loved and how hard they loved them. As a teenager, I thought of queerness as something that just defined who you are, not a core essence that exists within you. Thus, I conceptualized my own sexuality as something that only existed within the context of someone else. Just like Seth wouldn't be Seth without Summer, and Jim, Pam, and Dan, Serena, I wouldn't be a fully realized human being with a sexuality or a firm identity, really, out of the context of romance. So that's it for that.
So good. So I love that piece, and I love this book for a number of reasons, but something that particularly interests me is that our generation is at a point of our lives where we're in our 30s or we're turning 30, and we're sort of going to through a retrospective. We're looking at the 2000s as a time of, coming of age and exploring our queerness. And my question to you is, first of all, this is kind of like a seminal text, because as we're sort of like, turning 30 or we're in our 30s, we've reached a self-actualization that we can look back and actually mine our coming of age with a bit more attention to detail. So what I'm saying is you're basically, aren't you, Judith Butler?
Yeah,
And
okay, thank you so much. That's what I was waiting for.
quote me on it.
No.
So my first question to you was, did you get the idea for this book on the whole, or did one piece sort of spur the whole thing?
Right. So I actually started it as the essay about Katy Perry. I was kind of batting that around and writing. I wrote an early draft of it in 2018, which would have been like the 10-year anniversary of I Kissed a Girl coming out. And so I was like, well, maybe I could like pitch this around as a thing. And I didn't end up doing that, or it didn't get picked up, or something happened. And I then was like, oh, I can, and I found the way, like, oh, I can, it's like the looking back and being like, this song is like kind of fucked up and like whatever, but it's not really about like, in doing the thing, not doing the thing of like, let's look back and like cancel things that were, or like, and it's just so ridiculous to be like, did you know that like Love Actually is actually sexist? And I'm like, I do, but like I'm still gonna watch it every Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? Like that exercise just isn't really like intellectually interesting to me at all.
Right.
And so what I was trying to do with the Katy Perry thing was be more specific about like, okay, this song is like flawed and sends a flawed message, and like here are the specific ways it kind of like worked my brain a little bit at that time.
Right.
So that was where I like started with it, and then when that didn't like, when I didn't end up like publishing that anywhere, I was like, oh, I could actually just like make this into, I could do this with a bunch of different things, right? Like I like started just kind of thinking about like the shows that I watched as a kid and and the books that I read and all that, and was like, oh, I can actually do a similar thing just with a lot of different pieces of entertainment.
So if your editor were to be like, Grace, I need one more chapter, what would you include in that chapter and why? Like what pop cultural moment from the 2000s, movie, song, any sort of moment would you choose to include?
I mean, sort of like, so something that's really like baked into the premise of the collection is that it's all stuff that I genuinely watched as a kid.
Right.
I wasn't doing like, I didn't watch Buffy when I was a teenager. I didn't watch it when it was on. I didn't watch it in the 2000s. So I was like, as much as that is like such a big thing for queer kids and like people our age are like obsessed with Buffy, I was like, yeah, I didn't engage with that. So it didn't have like the core thing of having an effect on my personality or my brain when I was like this very like spongy teenager. So it would have to be something that I actually really like loved.
Right.
I did think about one thing that I've had these moments where I'm like, oh shit, I should have included that, and then I'm like, no, that kind of folds into like what I already wrote. But like one thing I do kind of wish I had explored a little more was Blink 182, and I think that they sort of fit into Banter Boys in a way. Like I think I could have sort of figured that out, but I do think there's something, and I've been thinking about this recently with like Olivia Rodrigo's new album, but like the Josie and the Pussycat soundtrack was very important to me as a middle schooler, and like sort of that like post-punk pop thing in the 2000s. I kind of wish I could get into that more. So maybe that's something that I would write, in the future. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so but would there be any like pop cultural staples that you would want to revisit just out of curiosity? Like, would you ever like dip a toe into Buffy or something like Charmed, which was my shit, by the way?
Totally. Oh my God. Charmed is your show. So I haven't watched it, but I used to live very close to the house that is used as the exterior for Charmed. And like, and there are truly always people outside taking pictures. And I'm like, wow, this is just like a big piece of pop culture that was very important to a lot of people. And I'm like, I'm happy for you.
You mean the house on Carroll Lane, downtown Los Angeles? I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm not
you were one of the people. I probably saw you there.
Like on every single, like on the stairs, on the lawn.
There's all these signs in the windows that are like, real people live here. Go away.
Did you see that they put like a Biden Kamala sign like over it? I'm like,
certainly.
So good.
It's always just like mobs of goth girls outside. I love it so much.
And me, which is a twink from Bushwick.
Yeah, you fit in. No, okay, so things that I would want to revisit. I mean, I do think that I don't know. I think that, so it was the, yeah, I think that I was pretty honest with like, these are like the big, like teenage things.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. The book is perfect as it is.
It totally is. And what I really like about your approach to it is that we can sort of, how do I say this? We can sort of, in this era where we are demanding more and more accountability, and we're sort of becoming very cognizant of the implications of things, and who we hire on screen and who we hire also behind the scenes, and this call for diversity and inclusion, and the language that comes with it. What I like though is that you are saying that we can exist in this way and continue to grow, but also we don't have to just eradicate the things that we loved in the past that are very much flawed, both when they came out and now in retrospect. And I sort of love that these things can sort of coexist. We can revisit these things without being like, oh, I'm gonna like deprive myself of the joy that this used to give me. And I really appreciate that read of it.
No, I'm really glad that came through, because like that's something that's really important to me, because I think that the notion of, like I was talking about before, like looking back at something and saying like, oh wow, this is actually like super sexist or whatever.
Right.
All that really does is highlight, and then just kind of like shitting on it and being like,
right.
Even if it was something that you like, especially if it was something that you like really loved as a teenager, all that really does is kind of put this like artificial space in between who you are now and who you were as
exactly.
a teenager, right? Like all it is this kind of thing of like pointing out, like it's sort of this like intellectual or like political flex that's like,
right.
I'm
exactly.
smarter, I'm better now. And it's like, no, you still like, I think that we are still are like, whatever. I think there's a part of us that's still our teenage selves at all times. Like, I don't think, like, I think that like one of the best things about movies, TV, books, like art, pop culture, whatever, is that it allows us to sort of like access different versions of ourselves, right?
Yes.
And you
can coexist.
Yeah. And so like, I'm like an old fucking millennial listening to the Olivia Rodrigo album, but like the emotional experience that I'm having while listening to Olivia Rodrigo, like, cry about her like Disney boyfriend, or like, I'm not even following what the real drama is, but like, I like the emotional experience I'm having while listening to that is thinking like, I remember being 17 and feeling, no one broke up with me at that point, but I remember like having those really like raw
Can't relate, Olivia. Yeah.
I can relate to feeling 17 and being like, everyone's telling me this is the best time of my life and I don't feel
right.
Like, anyway, so I think it's more about like, so I think when we're like, oh, when you're saying like, oh, that was actually so stupid, haha, you're kind of just like denying the fact that you ever were that person. And I think the more interesting thing is like allowing complicated things to be complicated and moving forward from it,
Yeah, you don't have to deny that part of yourself, because it's still like one of the layers of the onion that we are.
Totally.
And I mean, you and I we're probably used to communicating in like aim away messages and like MySpace songs, or like changing our top 8 MySpace friends to communicate the hierarchy. But I just think it's really, and imagine if we had like like that album when we were in middle school, because I think the way I know is like your high school, are you class of 2007?
2008.
2008. Okay, so
what were you?
I'm 2009. Okay. So you were
so different. We had entirely different experiences. You wouldn't understand.
Like black and white. but like for me, I just think it's really interesting that we've reached this point that, like I said, we're either in our 30s or approaching 30, and we can sort of look back on this time and think about how it sort of informed our coming of age. Because I feel like, when 2009, 2010 happened, like, we were in college and really sort of like, and the story that you included about, there was so many like parallels with my own story. And like, for example, how you sort of like just want to be rid of your virginity like that. Like I was the same way. I was like, you know, I'm out, but I just want to like seal the deal to say that I had sex.
That's it.
And
It was literally just to say something. There's no emotional value in it. And it's like because like our culture puts so much pressure on this thing. I think I say this in the book where I'm like, the only reason I'm even writing about this is because we say that this is an important moment in people's lives, but like it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Because it has that sort of like, it's structured in that binary way. It's like either black, white,
Totally.
that sort of dichotomy. And do you think for you, like going to college, I mean, I know I did it for me, like I moved to New York and was like, okay, like, do you think that gave you space to sort of like, you know, experiment with gender presentation and gender expression? And I mean, you talk about this in the book where you're sort of like trying to find yourself on a spectrum of like butch, and there's femme and there's soft butch, and like, all this terminology that a lot of queer folks are used to. Like, we have twinks and bears and tops and bottoms and all of this. But do you think going to college like allowed you that space to sort of like get into the messiness of identity a bit?
It's funny. Like, I think it definitely did. But I also think there was a part of me that was very aware of like the cliche of girls going off to college and like being bisexual in college or whatever. So
Right.
like yes, and like what of course like kids come out in college for a reason. Like it totally makes sense, especially in the 2000s and 90s and 80s. Like of course, like before then, even more so. But
Right.
like it totally makes sense that people would be out of just in a new environment, away from their parents, away from their family, away from maybe like a group of friends who didn't, wouldn't have been into that or supportive of it, like
Right.
in a new environment, and you like have the space to, flap your little butterfly wings. But like truly like knowing that that was such a cliche made me almost like push it off further. Like there was something
Right.
that I had where, and I think I still have this because like I'm a little shit, but like there's a thing of like knowing that you're falling into a cliche and being like, even though that's just like the way that you feel, and like they're cliches for a reason,
Right.
and being like, because that is a cliche, it cannot be true for me. I think I did that a
Right.
lot as a kid, and I think that comes up a lot in the book where I
Yeah.
see sort of like
Yeah.
these sort of like narratives about like what gay people and like queer women and whoever are like, and I'm like, oh, because of therefore that cannot be my experience, if that makes sense. That said, I like own a Subaru now, so I think that I've like moved past that emotionally. I'm like,
Right.
I'm all in on the stereotype. So
Right. And like you mentioned, I mean, you wrote about sort of being like, it's sort of acceptable to have a tomboy
totally.
phase, especially if you're a young girl growing up, but then like that's sort of not acceptable after puberty. But like,
Mhm.
so you sort of wrote about how I think it was, and then you were like, oh, you're okay having this phase, but then like once you start to sort of fall into that butch category, then you sort of like shied away from it, and then you fell into the femme category to sort of reject that butch stereotype. I think, is that something am I correct
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that?
totally. I mean, I think I was such a I was such a fucking tomboy when I was, little. Yeah, in prepubescent, whatever. Like, literally, just wanted to like be a direct replica of my brother, and like
Right.
hung out with boys and whatever. And yeah, it was a weird thing of like knowing that there was a part of me that knew that like it was not okay to be a tomboy as an adult.
Hmm.
Like I would meet these like my parents friends and aunts and uncles and whoever who were like so supportive of me, being like, it's so cool that you play soccer and climb trees and all these things that we didn't get to do when when we were girls. And
Right.
or some of them being like, yeah, I was a tomboy too, and I and like, but the woman who told me that they were tomboy when they were growing up was now like had a very femme presentation. And so I was like,
Right.
what happened? So the messaging
Right.
I got from that was like, this is a thing that is acceptable when you were a child and then you grow out of it, right? And that like part of growing up is like being like feminized in a way.
Right.
And yeah, and it's funny, and I think in high school I was just kind of like sporty, boyish, whatever. And it was when I came out, instead of people have like it's so normal for when people are coming out, kind of figuring out their sexuality, whatever, to uh like just change their aesthetic, change the way they look, they
Right.
present, like that. It goes in so many different directions. And for me, it went in the direction of being like, I am going to wear dresses now. Like this is
Right.
what I do. And
Like
that
a hard stop, yeah.
but it was kind of, it was this fear, it was this like internalized butch phobia of that I had from, I discuss this in the book, but like all kinds of stuff in pop culture. And I, like, so to sort of like, I ran in the other direction and was like, well, like, again, like what I was saying before, being like I will not be the cliche, like there, like I therefore cannot be this person. And like, even though my whole life I had basically been butch, like I'd been a tomboy, like once I actually became like realized as like a sexual young adult, I was very afraid of falling into that stereotype. And then it was kind of, the place that I fall at the end of that essay, and is that like, I think that I know that the labels of butch, femme, soft butch, blah, 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 like there's a whole spectrum that queer women are quite familiar with, but like,
right,
is that I understand that those labels can be really important to people and really empowering. I think especially butch is like something that is very empowering to a lot of people. I just don't really see gender presentation as I see it as a fluid thing, right? Like,
right. It's not a dichotomy. It's not like a binary.
Yeah, totally. And it's not that it's not just a binary, but that it's not permanent. Like,
exactly.
we go in phases in our lives. We can experiment with how we look and how we dress and how we project ourselves. And I think
we're
that's
not supposed to be static. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
I mean, it's messy and it's supposed to be like that. And so is language. I kind of we sort of go into the jargon and the history of butch and femme and how it's sort of evolved through the waves of feminism. And I love that you provided this historical context to it, because it sort of like shows you where we're going in terms of the future of language. And now, terms like genderqueer, even though they existed for decades, are becoming now very much a part of the lexicon.
Yeah.
And do you think that language in a way also something that's just gonna, I mean, it is going to be changing and evolving, but do you feel like what we have at our disposal now, I feel like is still going to sort of change? Like maybe there's going to be overlap between definitions, but I feel like that's just a direction we were always meant to go in.
Yeah. I mean, like, I want it, like, I mean, I think you're right. Like, I think there's so much about gender and sexuality that, like, we have not figured out, and there's probably going to be like much more to come. I will say that it is crazy that like lesbian is the word that it is, when it used to mean like a citizen of an island that existed like like several thousand years ago. So like, is that going to stay? I don't know. I think that word in particular is interesting because I think that there's a lot of there's a weird thing within the lesbian discourse, basically, of like, there is an association of women who identify as lesbians being TERFs, or being trans exclusionary radical feminists. So just like being transphobic, like that is definitely, there is like a subsect of people who are like that. And so I think that there's a lot of like younger, like millennial Gen Z lesbians who don't want to claim that word because they feel that it is associated with like an older generation that has bad politics, and this is like truly like I think like a very small but vocal like subsect of women. But I do think that there is it's funny, I think that word in particular is fading a little bit, but I think it's also that people are just embracing more fluidity and more, and like lesbian does feel, I think, to a lot of people like a very like, that's like a big word, and that doesn't really so I don't know, who's to say.
I feel like our need to like categorize, and I'm hoping that's going to sort of wane off, because we like to do that. I mean, especially when you're growing up in the 2000s and you've had this great sort of piece where there were queer characters, but their queerness was not really acknowledged or explicit. Yeah. And they, there was the theater gay, I think you mentioned in the Disney movie. Yeah, exactly. And I just feel like we're sort of embracing the freneticness of it all instead of just like putting ourselves in one category. I think it's really important to sort of like, embrace the overlap or not, or step outside of it. But that's something I was really interested in. And obviously the 2000s were, formative for you and I because, we were teenagers and we were coming of age in that time. And now I think there's a sort of, I don't know, there's a renaissance that I'm noticing. There's a lot of reboots if you watch, if you're tuned into media or if you're, depending on your media literacy, but there's a lot of reboots. I've seen the L Word rebooted, Sex and the City is being rebooted. And so I was curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think? There's so many like all these, I mean, there's the OC, there's following these models of these shows that were such hits in the 2000s. Yeah. And what are your thoughts about the reboots?
Of course, it's like they're also doing a Gossip Girl reboot.
Yes.
To me, I'm just like, oh my God, these just went off the air, but I guess it was like 15 years ago.
I know, it's scary.
But, like to me, I just think it's creatively really boring. Like, I agree. I think that if you, and I get why like a studio or a network would want to, like, they're going to take the safe bet.
It's right? Proof of product, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to take the like, oh, like we have the Gossip Girl brand. So like, even if it's entirely different characters, entirely different plot lines, like whatever.
Formula.
I don't doubt that it's going to be like, it'll probably be really fun. Like, but I'm just like, if you're, and so it's like, okay, we'll go with this because people will be excited that Gossip Girl's back, right? And like the same, I mean, Sex and the City I think is a little different because it's like, at least it's like the same actors except for Kim Cattrall coming back. So like that feels like, okay, well, we're actually visiting the same characters again.
Yeah.
But like my personal beef is with Riverdale because as somebody who read a lot of Archie comics as a child, I was like, none of this is canon. And where I'm like, if you want to write like a pulpy teen show about like kids and gangs or whatever, like in upstate New York, write that show.
Yes, thank you. Write that show.
You don't have to like drag poor Archie Andrews into this nonsense.
Use it as a comp, babe. Like,
so it's like, if you, I think it's good that we like recognize like, oh, these, we were missing some things in these shows. Like I wish, like, of course I wish like Gossip Girl were gayer or whatever, but like make your version of that show for the 2020s. Like it doesn't need to be the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, just because
it's a little meh to me.
Yeah, I mean, like it's just because it's a proven formula. I mean, I just feel
it's a business thing. Like it's like art existing in capitalism, so like that's what you're gonna get.
Exactly. And I feel like I don't know. I again, like I feel like it's just kind of lazy to like just basically recycle something without the right intention. So I mean
it's just to kind of like save face. I mean that's a cynical take. Like I think like probably it is really just like easier to sell a show if you've got the if you got Gossip Girl on
the longevity of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
What was the piece in the book that was the most fun to write or most effortless for you? That you could just go in on and you could keep going in on about?
Oh, I mean, the L Word one, it was so easy to go in on because it's just like the L Word is insane. Like and like speaking of shows that have been rebooted, with a very like I didn't watch the L Word reboot. I watched the first episode and was like, this is boring. Because I think like, so for those who are unfamiliar at home, the L Word is it was on 2004 to 2009, 2003 to 2009. And it is like, obviously it is a show that is like primarily about lesbians. It is been widely critiqued as being really transphobic and really biphobic and like only, not a whole representation of like the queer community, right? Which is like not every show can be everything, obviously. Right. We shouldn't expect that. But at the same time, it's like they were doing some like actively bad things on that show. And it particularly with one character who's a trans man on the show. And when they did the reboot, they they rectified all that. Like they were like, it's gonna be really so much more like inclusive, like gender wise, and it's gonna be, you know, having these more, I don't know, it was clearly going out of its way to solve those to address those critiques. And like it was just, it felt like they were just tiptoeing and trying to not get in trouble. And it's just like, no, just like make your like pulp lesbian trash. Like that is like at this point, I think what we all expect from it, what is like
right
from it. And like don't be transphobic, but like it felt doing that thing, I think, of like trying to be woke in a way that was like, this isn't how people talk to each other, you know?
right, like trying to score those woke points, being like, oh well,
Yeah.
I'm read up. Yeah,
And it's just like, oh, your characters are just talking like they spend too much time on Twitter, which like maybe they do. But what did you ask me? Something about, oh, going back. Yeah, so that, anyway, so because there's so much like wrong with the L word, like that was very easy to write, and it's probably the essay where I'm like most critical. But at the same time, like the L word, like, because so after it went off the air in 2009, it went on Netflix like pretty early into Netflix's like streaming.
Yes, I remember that.
And, like,
That's when I started watching it.
Yeah, that was really like, I watched some of it in college, but then like I really like dug in once it was on Netflix. And I think like because there was so little time from when it was off the air to when it went on streaming, and it was on streaming for like almost a decade, I think. It was kind of like there was this whole generation of women who like had this experience of watching the L word as their sort of like inaugural like gay experience, like
Right.
over and over again. Like I talked to friends who, you know, watched it when they were visiting their grandparents because they had Showtime or whatever. And
Yeah,
or like watched it, like rented it from Blockbuster and only watched it when their parents had gone to sleep. And so like, or maybe watched it with their first girlfriend, introduced it to them. So it's this very sort of like rite of passage thing. And because of that, but it's like, because it's not because it's good, it was because it was literally like all there was. Like it's like,
right, absolutely.
The only option for like just like a show about lesbians, and you're like, great, I guess this is what I'm working with. And so there's like pros and cons to that. Like, and I think the pros are that like you can, I don't think every millennial queer woman likes the L word. I would never say that. But right. I think that you could strike up conversation with most women of a certain age who are queer and just like lean on the L word, and like you'll at least have some fodder for a good like 20 minutes, you know? Like, and so it's sort of like, it's this weird glue of like, yeah, we've all seen this fucking show. Like what's your take? Who do you, you know, who
right.
do you love, who do you hate? Who do you, whatever. What's your hot take on the L word? So like, it's fun in that way that like, it lives this existence like outside of the show, I think, with like actual queer women, where you can just be like, it's sort of this lingua franca, which is
absolutely,
dark, but it's fun.
But to go off your point about the availability of these characters, I mean, like in the 2000s, like the bar was low. Like we took what we could get. And like,
who did you take?
I was I was an America's Next Top Model gay. So I was
amazing.
I was like, I have, you know, the beautiful like femininity of Miss J, and then, you know, Mr. J and the frosted tips. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you had like frosted tips and you were, you know, you live in Bushwick now. Hello.
Now the Gen Zs love frosted tips.
I know, it's coming back. The Herbal Essences situation. Do you know? Okay, this is something I'm obsessed with that I just remember. Do you remember how wild? This was a commercial that aired all the time. Remember the Herbal Essences commercial where they were like streaking and they were like at a streaking party?
Yes.
That for me was like formative. Like, think that's so unhinged.
So bleak that you're just like, I have this shampoo commercial and that's representation. I finally
yes, but like that was the bar for us, because like visibility, like even though visibility now is just like such a low bar, like the bar is in like Hades, like now we want like complexity in our queer characters, and we want their queerness not to serve as the impetus of the plot. Rather, it's sort of like what you said about in Banter Boys, where your queerness isn't this makes up the totality of you, it's in your essence, it's a part of you, just as anything else is a part of you. And I just feel like it was, you know, what we had, like we had such limited things. Like you talked about Ellen coming out and being like, yep, I'm gay on the cover. What was that? It was Time.
Yeah, it was Time.
Yeah. And then like there was this giant gap. And then we just took what we could get. And I feel like, and now there's so many, you know, I think what do you think? Do you think we're starting to see more of a complexity in our queer characters now?
I think so. I mean, you know, in the book, I really identify like Glee as this turning point, and so Glee came out in 2009, and like Glee is full. Speaking of gay shows that are full of flaws, like we got Glee.
Yeah.
But Glee also, like, you know, had gay teenagers doing the same things that we've seen teenagers doing in
Yes.
episodes for decades, right? And that was important. And I think that, yeah, I think there are like a lot of, you know, there are so many, like the 2010s, there's so many like richer, great
Right.
TV. I think that like, yeah, it was interesting. The Ellen thing is like realizing, like I was trying to like, you know, so Ellen came out in 1997, and I was like, okay, well, like what happened? Who were the big people who came out in the 2000s, and like what did
Right. And it's like
Lance Bass, Neil Patrick Harris, Wanda Sykes, Rosie O'Donnell, and like that's it. Because like Ellen's career ended after,
right.
You know, and it obviously didn't end, but like she was really, speaking of people getting canceled, right? Like it was like her show literally got canceled, and then, and like what's crazy is that like Laura Dern played her love interest in the episode,
and she still got shit too. Like she had threats.
Crazy. It's like, okay, you are straight and like also very well connected. Like, so that was really interesting. So Laura Dern, an ally. No, but it's crazy. Like people saw that like Ellen, you know, really took a hit after after coming out, and so the 2000s, like not a lot of celebrities did, and then now we're seeing. Now it's like everyone just like, you know, posts like an Instagram story with like their new boyfriend, and it's like, well, I guess that person's gay now. Like,
yeah, or it's like a casual, like you mentioned, like a casual in an interview, being like, yeah, this is something.
A fun tidbit, but it's like I don't care. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not the thing. Whereas like Lance Bass coming out, like one of the NSYNC members who like nobody really cared about, like it's like the cover of People magazine, where it's just like that just like wouldn't happen now. I mean, I think the big exception is with Colton, the Bachelor, coming out, and like, that was the thing where it's like, oh, he's doing the like the press tour. He has like the PR machine behind him.
It's the PR machine, yeah, that Ellen had that. And
he's like an Ellen style coming out, which I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And I think it is because he has such a broad reach, right? Like he's like, everybody watches it. I don't watch The Bachelor, but like everybody watches The Bachelor, like quote unquote middle America watches The Bachelor, like, you know. And I think that like, and of course like that is a show that is like, you know, he was like like famously and like purposefully straight on that show. And so maybe like for the people who are watching it who maybe aren't, you know, as up on, you know, queer nuance conversations, like whatever, would be like, hey, but he was straight on this reality show where he was trying to find a wife, like what's the deal? So maybe there's like a sense of him feeling like he needed to like explain himself more. The other thing is that like now he has a Netflix show. I think he has a documentary show that is exactly. So it's like he also has this like big deal, like where he's going to make a bunch of money off of his coming out. So I think that PR machine was very much about him making money off of it, and less about owing people an explanation, which is like what Ellen just like went on Oprah and took questions from the audience, and that is a crazy thing to have to do. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like women from suburban Chicago being like, first of all, how dare you? It was wild.
Stop putting this down our throats. I think one of the audience members said that to her, was like, you're crying this down.
Yeah, I quote this in the book, this woman in that interview who is rattling off all of the lesbian characters who have like literally appeared for like one episode on like a cop show or whatever it is. Like you are shoving this down our throats, and it's like all these like random ass characters who like I'm like, this person made no mark on history. And I was just like, why is this woman keeping such detailed track of this? Like something, I need to know more about this woman's
right. And I think it's something you tie so well. And I think that why folks like that were like keeping tabs like that is because, and it's something you mentioned, was that queerness was very much associated with sex, gay sex. And like, But you're
Yeah.
talking about, you're seeing, young children grow up and you're like, oh, he's a heartbreaker. And they're like 4.
Yeah.
But like, that's within like a heteronormative like box. But like, so I mean, that points a lot to our flaws in our, sex education and how we talk to, our young folks about, sexuality and like, but the truth is kids know from an early age. Like, I knew I was gay in utero. I didn't say I was because there's social cues that I picked up on, and I was like,
Yeah.
But it's such a brilliant like observation that you sort of, we can say like, oh, this, little boyfriend, little girlfriend, and they're in preschool, but like, boyfriend, boyfriend, or girlfriend, girlfriend, that's like, that's pushing
Yeah,
it.
and all I'm saying is I do want to be clear. Like, I don't think that we should be telling toddlers that they're dating anyone.
Yeah, we should
I'm not
not.
saying like representation for more like telling boys that they're boyfriends. I'm like, no, this is weird. Like, let's not sexualize the children at this.
Yeah. Yeah,
but I think the point is being like, we are very comfortable with, as a society, with heterosexuality as just being this thing that exists outside of like sex, right?
Right. Exactly. You can remove it.
Yeah, exactly. That it's like this is a different kind of thing. It's companionship. It's it's your gender expression. It's all kinds of things. Whereas like in in the 2000s, or at least I think like, especially I'm thinking about like the way that I interpreted like what adults were signaling to me as a kid, was very like, oh, to talk about gay people is to be talking about sex, and I should not be talking about sex because I am a child, which
Exactly.
is like not really, I mean, it's like gay queerness is about other stuff too.
Right, exactly. And another thing that and this is in Banter Boys, I believe, and it's something that I sort of have been, as I get older, is, do I want to be them or do I want to bang them? And you write this really great section about attraction and the nuance of attraction, especially as a queer person, because we have idols and we're like, do I want to be them or do I want to be in them? Like, that's like sort of and that's something I've personally been sort of discovering about myself. And I guess I want to know, like, when you're talking about this nuance of attraction, I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, even to like even verbalize that, how did you sort of like come to that point? Did it take you, a while to get to that point? Because I feel like I'm still learning that, very gray area of like, oh, I'm attracted to this person because I'm attracted to their energy. I want to be a creative partner with them, but I don't want to sleep with them, but I'm attracted to something. What was that like trajectory like for you? Was it like, 10 years? Was it like something that you just learned through people that you've met or dated, or?
I think that I think for me, it really was about like learning that through people I dated and being like,
Me too, yeah.
oh, I want to be friends with you. Like, I was just like, oh, we're too similar. Like,
right.
Like, but it just kind of takes trial and error with figuring that out, right? And yeah, I think the thing with like I think that attraction as a word, I think just needs to, I like to think of it as this really broad thing.
It's an umbrella term, really. Yeah.
To somebody as a friend, you can be attracted to somebody as again, like as a creative partner,
like a mentor, like absolutely.
Or totally, like there are so many ways that we're drawn to people, and I think that it is. I think that when you're queer and you're like, oh, I am feeling this feeling of being drawn to somebody who is so queer and is then there's this feeling of like, oh, then that must mean that I want to be romantically involved with them. And then you're like, oh wait, no, this is actually not working out. And it's
right.
So I think it's been mostly, I think for me it was really about like going on dates with people, dating casually, whatever, in my 20s, and then being like, oh, actually,
you're my writing partner.
yeah, totally. I'm just like, oh, we should just write jokes together, maybe.
Yeah.
And then, and so I think it's, I think that's really it. And I think it's still something that, I have to be like cognizant of, or like aware of like, oh, how do I like see this person fitting into my life? Or
right.
No, it's a journey. It's not something, it's not something that is, I think we're kind of taught that it is supposed to be something that we should know instantly.
Right.
I think it is a little more complicated than that for queer people.
Right. It's like when your well-intentioned friends are like, I have a friend who's gay.
Yeah.
And just assume that like it's like one of those.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, thank you so much, but like literally we are just that's not gonna work
We're
out.
Nintendo Switch friends.
You're like,
Thanks.
I don't even want to be friends with this person.
Right. I know that's like that goes back to your saying, how queerness is just like a facet of oneself and not the totality. And just because someone else is queer, like I might hate them.
Yeah, it doesn't make you a good person, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. We contain multitudes.
We contain multitudes, we can be absolute nightmares.
Nightmares.
So representation matters.
Yeah, exactly. I want to see more terrible queer people.
Or terrorists, yeah.
Truly. That's what I love to see. I like to see like queer villains and like, but it's nothing to do with their.
I do love seeing, queer villains are amazing.
Oh my God, yes. Hello. Okay, shit. Wait, I know I'm supposed to like keep an eye out for questions. I know that we're like, I'm talking your ear off.
I do have a question. Oh, but this is so.
Well, someone asked in the chat because I don't want to ignore anyone. Someone asked, Grace, since you've mentioned it a few times, what is your favorite song on Olivia's album?
Lisa, thank you for that. Okay, Deja Vu, I obviously am very into, but like since that wasn't the new one, or since like that's not new with the album, I've been really digging Jealousy lately. So
I do like that one, yeah.
Jealousy is working for me.
Brutal would have been my MySpace song.
Yeah, Brutal rules. Like Brutal is great. It's a perfect opening song.
Okay, another great one. Grace, who is your L-word character?
Okay, I think I am a this is maybe controversial. I think I am a Bet, but an Alice Rising. That's what my combination. A Bet son, Alice Rising.
I feel like we need to, also, this harkens back to a question that another show that was very pivotal, Ugly Betty. Because that was
watch Ugly Betty.
Oh my God, that was like a Glee situation where that was like an earnest attempt, even though there's tons of flaws, but
yeah,
that is one that I also remember being very formative.
Totally. That's a show that I feel like when people talk about it, they talk about it very passionately. Like the people who loved Ugly Betty are like, this show ruled. And I'm like, maybe I need to watch Ugly Betty.
I'm such a hypocrite because I'm like, reboots are boring. Get new. I'm like, but I would write on a reboot of Ugly Betty. I'm like, yes.
I'm about to reboot unless I'm involved.
Hello. We have another great question. Any formative butch icons from the 2000s or yesteryear?
Yeah, I write about this in the book, but like the 2000s, there was this idea, like there was a lot of, I point to like SNL sketches and stuff that were like making fun of lesbians. They had like a Queer Eye sketch that was like,
right,
were lesbians, and like it's the kind of thing where I'm like, and it's obviously like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Rachel Dratch, Maya Rudolph, and I think Paula Pell, and then like Jack Black who's hosting. And so it's like literally all these women who I am like fucking obsessed with, and rewatching it now, I'm just like, no, you're being so mean. Like, being like lesbians doing a terrible job at making over someone. But they're all very butch. So there was this very like, there was this idea that like, that because that was like the cliche, that like then there were like femme lesbians who were like, this isn't what we're like actually, like this is wrong. And it's like, no, that's not true. It's like a lot of people are like that. Like there are like butch people like do exist. So there was this weird, because of that, I think like with the L word, there was a sort of like flip to the other side of the spectrum, like kind of in the way that like I did personally, like when I came out and was like, like I don't want to be a stereotype, I'm gonna be femme, and so like there was just like so many that is like overwhelmingly like what we see in media. I think I do point to Jane Lynch in Best in Show though as a great butch icon, and as somebody who a great gay villain, like very much. Yes. So it's just like her queerness is not all of her. Like the biggest thing about her is that she's like a psychopathic dog trainer,
Love
and
it.
that is why it's great. Like that's why
Oh, Jennifer Coolidge in that movie.
perfect. Like no, like my butch femme dream combo. They're the best. So yeah, Jane Lynch is huge. She's great, and she also is on the L Word she has a funny character.
Yes, absolutely.
Like the one.
So we're gonna get the vaudeville hook soon. We get pulled off.
Oh,
it's just very hard for me to pry myself away from this conversation because it's everything I ever want to talk about. If there are any last minute questions, but I think our friends at Green Apple are about to hop on. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for talking to me about this magical book, which I hope everyone gets. It's so special, and thanks.
Greg, this is so much fun. I truly feel like I could just like
keep going. I know.
Just go into the night. So
I know.
We'll let you, the Green Apple folks.
And we forgot to talk about the Instagram chiropractor.
We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Cara's like, damn it.
Oh no, but it's a-okay. We'll have to read Grace's piece that she just wrote about the Instagram chiropractor. There we are. But this was so much fun. I had so much fun watching you all. It was truly entertaining. It's so funny you were saying that, just a personal note, that Grace, you graduated in 2007 and Greg, you graduated in 2009. I graduated in 2008. So I'm just like,
but you should have been here.
I was like, oh my gosh, y'all get me. But thank you so much. I'm really appreciative of you both joining us this evening for a really entertaining conversation. I'm really grateful to you all out there in internet land for joining us as well. You can find the link to both Grace and Greg's book coming out in paperback soon in a couple of weeks in the chat here. And we also do have signed copies of Grace's books, so you can make a note of that in your order and we will take care of the rest. And with that being said, thank you all so much and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.